There are a couple of key ideas that run through what I want to talk about here in the second talk. One is this. It's the concept of integrity. Integrity is really the basic concept your kids have to take through life. It's important in their married life. It's important for their career. Integrity is related to the word integer, or integrate, or disintegrate, and it means unity. Unity of what? Unity of intention, word, and action. That we mean what we say what we mean, and we keep our word. We do not lie, and we do not break our promises. Our word is important. We do not make promises lightly. If we make them, we must keep them. This is what parents have to teach their kids, that lying, breaking the bond of trust within the family, is about the worst thing they can do, and you would tolerate just about any other mistake, but not that. That's the beginning of it, the truth. The family is all about truth, justice, and love. The second major idea is that of personal best effort. You see, the whole approach that you have with your kids is this, and it's not easy to do at first, that you have to distinguish between the sin and the sinner. You have to distinguish between the fault and the person. When your kids do something wrong, if they spill something down, they lose their temper, they reach in to get some water and sprinkle the little sister in the face because it's fun. Your anger is not at them personally, it's at what they're doing. In other words, you come down on the fault, but you love your children absolutely and without qualification. They will sense in your anger, when they see it like this, that it is what they're doing that you're angry with, and that's what you want out of the house. They themselves, you would give your life for. Therefore, the kids sense you correct them because you love them. That once they have done their punishment, once they've apologized, you bring them back into your affection. So therefore, your whole approach in dealing with the kids is what I have called affectionate assertiveness. You make them do the right thing, but you do so with affection. And do you know where you show affection most of all with your children? In your eyes. You show affection in your eyes. And I would say this especially of men. It's something for men to realize, Your children will judge you more by the look you give them. Their whole way of making it through life will be in what they see in your eyes. You see disappointment at what they do, but affection for them personally. They can put up with any kind of problem, and they will always return to you. Men, husbands, don't always find it easy to be affectionate with their kids after a certain age. That is, a certain age of the kids, They say that men have, you've all experienced this and witnessed this. That men have their newborn, their little one-year-old child, a little son or daughter, and men have an almost irresistible urge for physical play with the child. Throwing him up in the air, making him squeal with delight. His wife is having a heart attack nearby. Throwing him up, bouncing on the knees, making funny faces, things that would look crazy to his boss. And why is that? Because it seems that nature wants this bond between father and children. Because otherwise the kids are scared of their father. The mother is the universe. She's nice and soft. She's got round edges. She smells nice. Her eyes are always looking straight into the face of her children. The dad, he smells bad. His muscles are hard. There are hard edges to him. And that sort of thing. And so to compensate for the fear that kids tend to naturally have for this kind of scary, deep-voiced giant that is around the house, that seems somehow as a satellite of his mother, then the father has this ability to play. And it's after a certain age, when they get a little bit too big to be thrown up in the air, that's when a father's affection seems to hold back. Men are just not naturally inclined to be buddies with their kids, grab them and squeeze them. Not everybody. But nonetheless, kids are very sensitive to the way their father looks at them. They say the people's attitudes towards life has a lot to do with their father looked at them when they were growing up. If he looked at them with disappointment, constant disapproval, kind of dismissing, saying, you're a bother to me, it's something that is a pain and a wound inside of them that lasts them all their lives. But if they see their dad looking at them with affection and pride, with expectations for their future, they say kids will come up to our expectations or down to them. When they see their dad look upon them and say, I want you to outdo me, and if you follow the lead I'm giving you and do what I say, that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to outdo me and make me proud of you. Then the kids can go out there and tackle lions. They can go out and make their way in life as an adventure. And they'll never, ever lose the memory of their father looking at them that way. I have to say sometimes to men, one of the gender differences is that men have eyes and ears disconnected in the center of the brain. You women have noticed this, I'm sure, for years. That men can stand next to each other, driving, working on something, and carry on a half-hour conversation and not once look each other in the face. Women don't understand that because they're constantly looking each other in the face. They're always wanted, the eyes have to meet. The eyes are meeting like that. As any man notices, if he's driving behind two women talking, in the car ahead, he sees their silhouettes looking at each other as they're going 10 miles an hour, under the speed limit. So I've advised men, if you want a really close relationship with your kids, especially with your daughters, all right, go out of your way to make eye contact with them. When you sit down talking, you want to tell your daughter something very serious, for instance, dress modestly. Girls need to hear this coming from their dad, a deep, male, powerful voice. Dress modestly. When you dress modestly, you draw men's attention to your face. Your whole dress, especially if it's beautifully done, for all of your dress, it forms a framework for your beautiful face. Because it's in your face that a man will fall in love with you, especially in your eyes. All right? When you dress well, men are drawn to your eyes, and that's where they see your soul, your beauty, your femininity. And that's what's going to last them all their lives. Even when you're 70 years old, your face has changed quite a bit. Your husband will still look into your face and see those same beautiful eyes, the eyes in the mirror of the soul. All this happens if you dress modestly. If you don't dress modestly, a man's eyes are every place but your face. And they will be tempted to treat you like a thing. That's one of the things men have to teach their daughters. But you do it with your own affection. Go out of your ways to make eye contact, and your daughters will listen to you and remember what you have to say. This business about personal best effort is very important. It's true in business. You all know this. We all do better work under pressure. There is a whole movement of education in my country that has petered out because of its silliness. It's terminal lunacy. That you get kids to work at their own pace. If we all worked at our own pace, we'd still be living, in huts someplace. We're reading by candlelight if we read it all. No, we all work better under reasonable pressure. Reasonable pressure brings out the best in us. Unreasonable pressure is worse than none at all. You all understand what I'm talking about. So parents, when they're dealing with their kids, have to realize, I want my son, my daughter, to work to the best of their ability, but no more than that. Einstein once said, things should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. All right? Your kids should work to the best of their ability, but don't press them beyond that, because that will cause them to be unself-confident, insecure, and that will make their own work fly apart. What you want are people who find their own pace and can meet that as a habit, as a way of working. It's true out in business today, too. The best bosses are the ones who know how to pace their employees, make them put out their best, but not work them so hard or so unreasonably that they will leave and leave a vacancy here. The best bosses hold on to good people. They want to hold on to their good people, not just complete projects. I heard a story one time about Henry Kissinger when he was Secretary of State. You younger people don't remember Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger was, I mean, he had a number of problems, a number of faults, but there's no question he was a first-rate professional and respected for that. One time he hired a professor a young professor at Harvard named Winston Lord, who came down to Washington to work for him. This is early on in the Nixon administration, the middle of the Vietnam War. And Kissinger assigned Lord his first week on the job. He said he gave him a paper to write. I don't know what it was about. It was some kind of study he had to do in the course of a couple of weeks. Lord came back with his paper. Now, this is a man with a PhD, international reputation. He came back with his paper and turned it into Kissinger's office. The next day, it came back from Kissinger with a little note on it saying, "Is this the best you can do?" How'd you like to get that your first week on the job? Is this the best you can do from your own boss? So he gulped, took the thing home, redid it as best he could, rearranged it, rewrote it, turned it in again. And it came back from Kissinger the next day with another note saying, "Is this," and this underline, "is this the best you can do?" So, oh geez, so he took it home, cleared his calendar for the weekend, went through the whole thing, all of his notes, rearranged. Now, this is pre-word processor days, all right? He got the whole thing done. Then he turns it in on Monday. And it came back to his office that afternoon with another note on it saying, "Is this the best you can do?" So this time he lost it. Picked up the paper, walked down to Kissinger's office, walked into his office, steam coming off his head, dropped it on Kissinger's desk and said, "Yes, damn it, that's the best I can do." So Kissinger said, "All right, then this time I'll read it." So you teach your children, the quality of good work. That Aristotle said, where the happiness consists of the full use of our powers along lines of excellence. But excellence comes, and full use of one's powers comes with a certain peace of mind, a certain way of working. So, and this comes from having been brought up in a family where people are understanding and forgiving, who make demands on us, but also can forgive and lay off. To find what is the best you can do, and that's all. We value your work. You need to value your own work. But above your work, we value you. I want your lifelong happiness. That's what's important to me. We've talked here, competent, responsible, considerate, generous men and women committed to live by principles taught to them by their parents, who've internalized their parents' values. But, I've found that, as I said at the very beginning here, most parents have difficulty thinking 20 years ahead of their sons and daughters. I think many parents have trouble thinking what their son is going to be like as a young man. But you know what? They have a very clear picture of what their son-in-law should be like. If you have a daughter who's in her 20s and she's going seriously with the young man, you look very closely at his judgment, responsibility, courageous perseverance, self-control, charity, considerateness, good manners. Okay? So I think, and of course it works for the daughter as well. If you have a son and she's going with a young lady, both the husband and the wife, but especially the wife, looks real closely at what this girl is like. So if you want the ideal for your children, picture them someday as somebody's son-in-law and daughter-in-law. Think of the kind of young man you would want your daughter to marry someday. That's the model for your son. That's the kind of man he should grow up to be. Now I want to get into some of the nitty-gritty here. How do parents actually, on the right down on the ground level, have these virtues of judgment, responsibility, toughness, self-control, charity taught to their children? They do it in 3 ways. They do it, first of all, with example. Somebody once said that leaders do not have followers. Leaders have joiners. Leaders are engaged in some activity, and they get other people to join them. Parents strive themselves to live as men and women of judgment, responsibility, conscience, self-control, all the virtues. They try themselves to live as great men and women, and then they lead and insist their kids follow along and join them in that enterprise. The parents, in other words, do not expect any more of the children than they demand of themselves. And all great leaders do in business or elsewhere. And when the parents do this, when they see this, when they have a job to do and are leading the way, you see, the kids respect them. I don't just mean fear them. I mean, the children, all respect, comes from some perception of strength. The kids look at their parents and they see judgment, responsibility, powers emanating from that, because that's what all of these things are. Virtue means power. And as a consequence, the kids unconsciously imitate them. We all do, don't we? At all of our ages, we unconsciously imitate people we admire. I went into an office one time to meet with an executive. This was in New York. And I was met at the door by the secretary, the receptionist, and I said, "I'm here to see Mr. So-and-so." She said, "Tremendous, have a seat." Americans exaggerate things like that. "Tremendous, have a seat." So I sat down and somebody else walked by. "Are you being taken care of?" "Yes, I'm here to see Mr. So-and-so." "Tremendous." Then I met somebody else, who led me down into his office, and we were talking, and she said "tremendous" twice in the course of the thing. I think, what's this tremendous business? Everybody says this. So I walked into the office. This man was the vice president of sales, for an international corporation. And I shook hands with him, a real leader. I said, "I'm here to talk to you about so-and-so." He says, "Tremendous. Let's get down to work." That's where it was coming from. This man was a real leader. People liked him, respected him, and trusted him. And so unconsciously they imitated the way he talked, the way he did things. And that's what seems to happen in the family. The kids love and respect their parents. Unconsciously, they pick up the way their parents live. Now, how do you pick up the pace on that, though? You can't just depend on their looking at you. You also have to teach them by the second way, directed practice. You make them do the right thing over and over again. They say kids finally grow up when they do the right thing without being told. And that comes about by habits. They have a habit of brushing their teeth. They have a habit of apologizing if they've done something wrong. They have a habit of saying please and thank you. Kids do not come into the world saying please and thank you. Have you noticed that? They do not come in considering the rights and sensibilities of others. They're grabbers. You want to turn your kids from grabbers to givers. And the way you do that is that you persistently insist that they say please when they want something. And lead the way by your saying please and thank you to each other. Please, thank you, I'm sorry, and I give my word. The four great pillars of civilized existence. Please, thank you, I'm sorry, I give my word. And when the kids hear that, from the mother and father and the parents say, we say please and thank you, you have to do the same. It's just the way we do things in this family. And then you insist on it. Now, the tough thing is, you see, that, you Singaporeans are like us Americans in this respect. We want to see results yesterday, all right? We want to see things done right now. It's very difficult to make long-term plans, to keep putting work in, seeing nothing happen. And that's exactly what happens when you teach your kids please and thank you. You may say to your kids, say please, say thank you. Oh, let's face it, 5, 10 times a day for weeks and months and maybe a year or two at a time. Hundreds and hundreds of times doing it. But then, one day, you notice they're actually saying it on their own. They're doing the right thing without being told. I've told parents it's sort of like hammering a nail into a very hard wall. I don't know if you've ever done that, all right? To a very, very hard wall. You tap and you tap and you tap the nail. Some molecules may be moving there, but you don't see anything happening. Keep tapping and tapping. You may keep at that for 15 or 20 minutes till finally, miraculously, the nail is in there, and it's in for keeps, and you can hang anything from it. It's in strongly. So too it is with please and thank you and I'm sorry and I give my word. You keep at it until it's in them for life. And what do you hang on it? You hang the notion that other people have rights and therefore we have responsibilities. Nobody owes us a living. We are already in debt from the moment we're born. Everything good we have has come from others. And therefore others are what counts. Others are what life is all about. The happiest people you will ever meet are those whose life is given over in service to others. That's why there's so many happy mothers. They don't have time to think about themselves. They're concerned with their family, with the great love at the center of their life. Well, when you have this idea, you constantly working to check the kids, directed practice, then finally comes word. It's really the last 10% of the whole thing. Why do I have to say please and thank you? Well, then you explain. It's really just explanation of what they see in the family and what they're made to do. Because other people are not things, that's why. Because your sister has feelings, all right? And because she has feelings, you owe it to her. Nobody has a right to offend other people gratuitously. Nobody has a right to do that. Everybody has a right to be left alone. The definition of peace, whether it's in the family or in international affairs, is that other people leave us alone. Everybody has that right, and that's why you keep insisting on it. Now, I'm going to come back to that in just a couple minutes, but I want to show you here. If you talk about rules in the family, anytime you have a job to do, you've got rules, let's face it. I've seen some families are like picnics. Where people have a lot of work to do, homework, professional work, then they come home and they crash, or the kids crash with them, in watching television, vegging out, and just you go from drudgery to debauchery, or close to it. And kids can grow up like that too, at the university level. You'll see they work like bejeebers for 5 days a week, and then Friday night they're drunk and can kill themselves sometimes. Over and over again this happens. This kind of wild distinction. Rather than when you work to serve other people, you also enjoy life immensely. You're balanced. So if you've got a job to do in raising your kids, you've got to have some rules. People need to know what's expected of them. I came across this wonderful column by an American advice giver, one of these, advice to people who write in. Her name is Ann Landers. Have you heard of her? Do you have her here? This is a great column. It appeared a while ago. It's a reprint of something that happened several years ago where a teacher in Wellesley, Massachusetts, which is a very affluent suburb of Boston, it's very close to where I live. A teacher of 8- and 9-year-old children asked them, pretend that you're Ann Landers, you're giving advice to families, all right? What advice would you give to parents about how they should treat their kids? Isn't that interesting? The little kid's perspective, Kids pretending to be parents, what advice would you give? Do you want to hear what they came up with? This is the advice kids give to parents about raising kids. 1, don't give me everything I ask for. Sometimes I'm just testing you to see how much I can get. Don't always be giving orders. If you suggest something instead of giving a command, I'll do it faster. Don't keep changing your mind about what you want me to do. Make up your mind and stick to it. Keep promises, both good and bad. If you promise a reward, make sure you give it to me. If you promise a punishment, make sure I get that too. Don't compare me with anybody else, especially if the comparison will hurt somebody's feelings. I don't want to be considered smarter than somebody else because it will hurt that person's feelings. If you make me out to be dumber than somebody else, then it will hurt my feelings. Isn't that amazing sense, huh? Let me do as much for myself as I can. That's how I learn. If you do everything for me, I will never be able to do anything for myself. Don't correct my mistakes in front of other people. Tell me how to improve when nobody is around. Don't scream at me. Don't scream at me. It makes me scream back. And I don't want to be a screamer. Screamers sound awful. Don't tell lies in front of me or ask me to tell lies to help you out. It makes me think less of you and less of myself, even if I'm supposed to be doing you a favor. Wow, what insight. When I do something wrong, don't try to get me to tell you why I did it. Sometimes I don't know why myself. Don't pay too much attention to me when I say I have a stomach ache. Playing sick can be a good way to get out of doing things I don't want to do or going places I don't want to go. Make sure it's real. When you are wrong about something, admit it. It won't hurt my opinion of you. It will make it easier for me to admit it when I am wrong. And finally, treat me as you would treat a friend. Then I will be your friend, and you will be mine. Just because people are related does not mean they can't be polite and nice to each other. Isn't that terrific? Well, what I have to say to you here is based on the experience I've had with families. And let me tell you this, all of the great families I know have rules for raising the kids. They're rules that the parents live by themselves. And you're going to get a list of those rules at the end of this morning's session. There are dozens of them. I don't know any family that lives by all these rules, by the way. All right, but I've just compiled them over the years. I'll give you a couple in a moment here. But the key thing about the rules in every healthy, effective family is that they begin with the word we. Not you, we. That is, in our family, we don't care what anybody else does in any other family in the rest of society. In our family, we do things this way. Therefore, the kids have a sense of family honor, of family loyalty. That's one of the advantages kids have with their grandparents, that they have frequent relationship with their grandparents because they get the sense that their family is the latest chapter in an ongoing adventurous novel, and that their life with their children later on will be a continuation of that great family story of which they are the latest chapter. To give them a sense, that their heart belongs to other people. If they don't have a loyalty to their family, they're going to live like barbarians out there in the society. Your family's first. So anyway, these rules begin with the word we, which means, of course, the parents live by the same rules themselves. The parents don't say, you have to get in at 11:30. The parents say, rather, we all get in from social events at a decent hour. It's not you must apologize to your sister when you've bothered her. It's we apologize to anybody if we've offended. All right? It's not you have to say please and thank you. We all say please and thank you here in the family. It's not you must not pig out, with food and drink. It's we in this family do not pig out. We don't need to. We enjoy life. We enjoy each other. Food and drink are just occasions, almost excuses to get together with the people we like. All right? We don't go after something sheer for its own escape. That it's not you have to take care of your part of the house. Rather, we all pitch in to make this place a decent, civilized place to live. That's what it is. And the father says to all the kids, we treat mom with respect. I treat her with respect, and you better do the same. So that seems to be one of the rules, one of the roles that fathers have in a family, especially as the kids approach their teenage years. And that is, they protect their wife. They protect their wife from the kids aggressiveness, from what the kids do. A father says to the kids, we treat this woman as the queen of this house. All right? She's the number one person in our lives, in mine as well as yours. So get this, buddy. All right? If you make her unhappy, that makes me unhappy. And if I'm unhappy, boy, are you going to be unhappy. A woman who does not have that kind of protection from her husband, who just shrugs and goes his way, feels unprotected, insecure, and filled with anxiety. And it is an absolute nightmare for many, many women when their husbands are clueless about their role in protecting their wife from abuse from their own kids. There are lots of stories about child abuse, and of course it's quite a real problem. But in many, many families, especially with teenage kids, there's such a thing as parent abuse. Sons and daughters can do an awful job on the sensibilities of their mother. A dad does not let that happen. So all of the rules in the family start with the word we. You're going to get a list of that, as I said. Now, what happens, though, when you have this, when you have these rules in place? How do you enforce them? Well, I'll tell you, there are a number of techniques that different families have. But the one way I have seen that seems to work well, and it's really the nub of what we're talking about here, is that parents have to make a kind of stratified approach to disciplining the kids. The one thing I would disagree with in that book I mentioned to you earlier is that they use the word discipline as if it meant punishment. I think punishment is different from discipline. Discipline is related to the word disciple. It means essentially you're a leader who has joiners. It means it has a teacher who has people who are learning. That's what happens in the family. So your children are your disciples. And kids have to be taught with praise and with showing things as much as with punishment when they do wrong. General Patton, the U.S. Army, used to say, everybody needs a pat on the back once in a while. Sometimes high, sometimes low. But really smart parents make praise every bit as specific and frequent as punishment. Kids need praise, especially boys. Boys need praise a lot from their mothers. You know, when they do things right, occasionally, when they do things right. That once in a while they have to hear. If they hear nothing but negative carping, the implicit assumption within that in the mind of the young male is, I'm incompetent. She thinks I'm incompetent. And as I told you, you women here, all right, males won't stand being called or treated as if they're incompetent. Men cannot stand that, even when they're little kids. So the way you reach your sons is to praise them when they do something right. And if they're doing something wrong, in a serious way, you punish that as well. Here's what I'm saying. You know, a lot of families have found it most effective to distinguish 3 different levels of punishment for 3 different affairs. If we may put it this way, at the lowest level are misdemeanors. You know, petty crimes, if you will, or within family life. And these are the kind of kiddish things that kids will normally do anyway because they're kids. You know, they track mud into the house. You know, they don't put their clothes back. You know, they leave a towel on the floor, this sort of thing. Now, you mothers know, if you try to correct every single one of these things in your children, you know what would happen, don't you? I mean, without too long a time, you would be carried out the front door of your place, you know, wrapped in a straitjacket, screaming and shrieking, with all the neighbors looking on. You simply cannot correct every one of these things. Many of the things they'll outgrow anyway. Your attitude toward correcting them has to be that, I think, you know, of a factory with the quality control process. You know, they don't check every single piece of candy that's coming through. You know, they have to pull out one every 100 or one every 50. Well, you correct it once every 5 times, once every 3 times, and the rest of it, you put the towel back yourself, you know. You correct them on that often enough. You make them do what they're supposed to do, often enough to remind them they're supposed to do it. But don't look for results. You look for best effort. The next higher level, though, of wrongs are what we might call felonies. Okay, we have the little misdemeanors below. Those are most of the rules that I will give you in this sheet. The next level are felonies. These are things where they have to be seriously corrected every time. And that is matters in which they infringe on the rights of others, especially their siblings. Okay? If, for example, they take things that don't belong to them, they whack their fellow sibling, you know, brother or sister, they use abusive language with each other. I don't have to go into it. You've seen it hundreds of times. You know, they treat each other like things. This you come down on every single time. Because if you don't correct them in this, then it forms a habit in the way they deal with people their own age. It'll spill over into their friendships, the way they deal with kids in school, and then later, the way they deal with fellow teenagers, indeed the way they deal with the opposite sex. In other words, what I'm saying is every time you correct your kids in the way they deal with their brothers and sisters, you are pounding into them the lessons of moral life. That other people are not things. We have no right to infringe on their rights. Your children's future marriage will depend largely on how they treat their brothers and sisters when they're younger. Does that make sense to all of you? And it should keep you going, you know, because it can be exhausting trying to make peace between them. I should tell you this too, and I'm sure many of you can verify this. The brothers and sisters that you squabbled with and fought with and everything when you were growing up, gradually grew, you and your brothers and sisters grew closer and closer together until now you are lifelong friends. You know, my sister and I came from a very active verbal family. And my sister had a fuse that was about 1 millimicron long, and so did I. So the two of us would shout and scream at each other. And we lived in an apartment complex. And my mother was absolutely mortified with this. You know, we'd be yelling at each other for about a minute or so. When we died down, she'd laugh. So the neighbors would think it was all a joke. You know, we were all acting. Then we got up into high school, and we got along better than ever together. And then now today, I mean, we run up, awful phone bills talking with each other. We love each other. The strongest bond in the world is that between parents and children. The second strongest bond is that between brothers and sisters. You know, you can always count on your brothers and sisters, no matter what happens. So anyway, that's the second level. The third level are what we might call the capital offenses. Okay? This is where the roof falls in on them, whatever it might be. And I'll come to that in a minute, too. And what are these? What are the things you must correct them very severely every single time? Well, you know, it's like this. It's those situations where they're doing something so unjust that if they're not corrected in this, they could meet with disaster later on. And those are in, I would say, 3 areas. First, if they show disrespect for you personally. They use bad language with you. They go to hit you back, you know, if you're trying to discipline them, if you're trying to punish them. They cannot treat you with disrespect. This you will not tolerate. The second thing is if they treat your rightful authority with disrespect. That is, they do not do something you told them to do, or they say no to you. You see, they have to take your no, and you don't have to take their no. That's the way it works. No only works in one direction. And when you do this over and over again, they get the message, all right? Mom and Dad are in charge of things around here. And remember what I told you, if they don't respect your rightful authority, they're not going to respect any other rightful authority later on. And that could cause them serious, serious trouble with their marriages, and it could cause serious trouble with their careers. A guy who does not, a young boy who constantly grows up yelling back and forth with his mom and dad, and then goes out and tries it with his boss, his first boss, is going to wind up looking through the classified ads, let's face it, real fast. So you insist that they respect your rightful authority. And because after all, everything else you have to teach them depends on that. You can't teach them, you know, how to respect their brothers and sisters. You can't tell them how to respect the rules of the family unless they respect your rightful authority. Why is it rightful? Why do we say that? Because in life, authority and responsibility have to go together. They have to be in proportion. If there's authority, that is power, without responsibility, you have abuse, you have tyranny. If you have responsibility without authority, without the power to carry it out, you have an awful burden to carry. So what are the responsibilities you have as a parent? They're enormous. You answer to the law. You answer to the society, what people think. You answer to your own conscience. And you know what? You will later answer to your own children. Because someday they will look back and judge you by the way you raise them. They will judge you for that, for good or for bad. So since you have all that responsibility, you must have the authority to go with it. Therefore, there is such a thing as parental rights. You have a right to be obeyed. You have a right to have that right respected. And if your kids do not, they need to be punished for it. Think of punishment, if you will, as memorable correction. A correction in a matter that's so important, they must remember that correction and the lesson behind it. Now, the final way is this, if your children lie to you, if they deliberately tell a falsehood to you in order to evade responsibility, that you cannot tolerate. Truth is absolutely important. You've got to be able to trust your children's word. Now, some families have had this as a way of getting their kids into the habit of telling the truth and see how important it is, that you value it. It's this. If you think they are telling a lie in a fairly important matter, you tell them, all right, go over there into the corner, go someplace else in the house, think this over for a couple minutes, calm down, then come back here and tell me the truth on your honor. The kids have to hear that word, honor. Whatever you tell me on your honor, I will believe. Because you're saying it on your honor. There's a difference between telling a spontaneous fib and being a liar. You cannot be a liar. This we will not tolerate. The society doesn't tolerate. You're going to get into horrendous problems if you're a liar. You've got to tell the truth and keep your word. That's what integrity means. So you punish the kids for that. So we have these 3 capital offenses. If they do not respect you, they do not respect your authority, and they do not respect their own given word, their truth-telling word. Now, what is this like? Some people have noticed, this is rather like what happens in the criminal justice system. I'm sure it's the same in your country as in mine. You know, you can get a lighter sentence, especially if you have a real good lawyer. You can get a lighter sentence for just about anything, except in two areas. One is contempt of court, and the other is perjury. All right? If you deliberately disobey a court order, you will spend time in jail. No question about it. No plea bargaining. And if you tell a lie under oath, you're in extremely serious legal trouble and financial trouble. Now, why is that? Because everything else in the criminal justice system depends on those two things. The courts would have to shut their door if they couldn't get respect for their rightful authority and also respect for telling the truth when you put on your honor, when you put under oath. And it's the same in your family. All kinds of things they can get away with, except those areas. Does that make sense to all of you here? You know, it's really important that long term, once again, you think long term. What time do we finish here? Right now? Okay. I'm going to get back to this matter when we finish in just a moment. But I want you to understand this, all right? Your kids' respect for you and their respect for the truth is what can save everything in their lives and make them grow up to be great men and women. Just be patient with it. And you're going to have to especially be patient during that time of life when they enter their teenage years. It's in the teenage years that their values for life are set for life. And that we'll talk about in the next session. Thank you very much.